Liberal public safety minister is once again backpedaling on the Feds' gun confiscation program, contradicting a leaked recording the minister had with one of his rental tenants, released to True North just a day before.
A taxpayer-funded Antifa-linked activist group is hiring an investigative journalist to report full-time on what the organization deems to be far right.
BC Conservative leader John Rustad won a leadership review with over 70% support from party members on Monday evening. Hello Canada, it's Wednesday, September 24th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Zoltan.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangri said he has, quote, absolute confidence that law-abiding Canadians will hand over their firearms to comply with the Liberal government's gun confiscation program. On Tuesday, Anandasangri officially announced the launch of the gun grab program at a press conference where he spent much of the time contradicting comments he made privately to one of his rental unit tenants in a leaked audio recording just the day before. Anandasangri insisted in his opening remarks that, quote, the program is voluntary. Nobody is having their weapon confiscated. He said that nobody is being forced to participate in the buyback program. However, he clarified that when the amnesty period concludes, anybody who does not comply will be considered a criminal for violating federal law. He later added that he had, quote, every confidence in Canadians to voluntarily comply with the confiscation program.
I have every confidence that law-abiding citizens, first of all, will ensure compliance with the law. Secondly, I also have every confidence that law enforcement will be able to do their job and to ensure the implementation of the criminal code. Canada is a rule of law country, so if it is in the criminal code, it is imperative that police of jurisdiction are able to implement that law.
Liberal MP Natalie Provost, who was alongside Anandasangri at the announcement, maintained that while the program was voluntary, the decision to not comply would constitute, quote, committing a crime. In French, she said, quote, yes, it's possible that after the program there will be people who choose to keep prohibited weapons in their homes, but those people are committing a crime. When fielding questions from the media, Anandasangri was grilled over remarks he made in a leaked audio which seemed to contradict much of what he was claiming to support only a day later. So Alex, how did Anandasangri's comments on Tuesday contradict the audio recording he was speaking about the day prior?
In leaked audio provided to True North, Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangri dismissed concerns from licensed gun owners who worried about being arrested if they refused to surrender firearms banned under the Liberal government's gun confiscation program. Now, Isaac, as you may recall, this quote-unquote gun buyback program, which has transformed over time into a gun confiscation program, but now seems to have transformed, according to the public safety minister, into a voluntary program. It goes all the way back to 2020. That's over 3 public safety ministers ago. The audio, which was provided to True North by the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, was recorded by a tenant of one of Anandasangri's rental properties. The minister actually initiated the conversation on the gun confiscation program, which he suggested will be launched as of yesterday. Anandasangri told the tenant that he had 3 options. He could either deactivate the firearms, turn them in for compensation, or do neither. The tenant asked the minister whether he would become a criminal if he refused to comply, and Anandasangri expressed doubt and added, I just don't think municipal police services have the resources to do this. I would tend to agree with the public safety minister. Again, this program goes back the better part of the last decade. More than 3 public safety ministers ago, has cost the Canadian taxpayer millions of dollars and has resulted in paltry, if any, gun confiscations. So I would say that Anandasangri had a rare moment of clarity of thought when he said that police resources would be stretched thin if police services were to try to enforce the buyback program. He even said to the tenant, I will come and bail you out if that happens. You call me. An activist group that claims to be, quote, independent, despite being subsidized by taxpayers, is hiring an investigative journalist to monitor and report on what it deems to be, quote, far right. The Canadian Anti-Hate Network posted a full-time remote position paying $60,000 a year on LinkedIn last week. The job posting has over 100 applicants at this article's time of publication. The first responsibility listed for the job is monitoring far-right spaces. The organization's definition of far-right was derived from work by Dr. Barbara Perry, and Dr. Cass Muddle. Harry was recently defended by the CBC for falsely claiming Charlie Kirk called for queer people to be executed during a live broadcast.
There's also the hypocrisy there, I think, that feeds into the rhetoric, right, where he's talking about the polarizing rhetoric and the vilification, which is very much, laid at his feet in terms of exactly the language that we're seeing there. The language even that Charlie Kirk uses. Vilifying particular groups, talking about the Democrats, for example, as, and I quote, standing for everything that God hates, claiming that, queer people are defective and dangerous and should be executed. I mean, that's sort of polarizing language that contributes to this environment, this loss of civility, and encourages violence directed towards the enemy, whatever the stripe. And we are seeing this from both sides.
The job posting lists several of the organization's priority areas. They include Christian nationalism, anti-2S LGBTQIA+ movements, anti-gender movements, and male supremacist movements. Between 2020 and 2026, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network received 3 federal grants totaling almost $1 million. These include $268,400 under the Anti-Racism Action Program for, quote, containing and countering Canadian hate groups. Another $440,000 under the Community Support Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Initiatives Program for, quote, encouraging anti-hate activities in Canada. And then another $200,000 from Public Safety Canada's Community Resilience Fund to develop a, quote, ethical framework for research on far-right organizing in Canada. So, Isaac, what do we know about this so-called Canadian Anti-Hate Network?
Yeah, Alex, you covered a lot of what we know, but of course, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network is a Toronto-based nonprofit that has built its reputation by positioning itself as Canada's primary, and even according to them, the only watchdog against what it labels as far-right movements. But while it presents itself as independent and nonpartisan, the group has relied heavily on taxpayer dollars to fund its operations. As you mentioned, since 2020, it has secured more than $900,000 in federal grants from programs run through Canadian Heritage and Public Safety Canada, with subsidies earmarked for countering hate groups, promoting anti-hate activities, and even building an ethical framework for research into so-called far-right organizing. And the group's definition of far-right activity is broad. According to its own website, priority areas include neo-Nazism, white nationalism, Christian nationalism, male supremacist movements, and opposition to gender ideology. In fact, the definition on their website for what far-right is, which was also on the job posting, by the way, is a bit convoluted. It reads, quote, domestic extremism is a belief system that is characterized by its reference to racial, ethnic, and cultural supremacy, which advocates a system of belief in inequality based on an alleged difference and the perceived threat posed by outgroups. This extremism is often framed in terms of white power and commonly exhibits nationalism, racism, xenophobia, anti-democracy, misogyny, hate against minority communities, and strong state advocacy. So while in my opinion that definition didn't really necessarily define what far-right even is, it definitely tried to jam as many buzzwords in there as it possibly could. But as for the network, in the past, it has singled out political figures under the guise of tracking extremism. For example, in 2021, the group accused former Newfoundland Premier Brian Peckford and former BC Premier William Zandersalm of legitimizing conspiracy theories after they criticized pandemic restrictions. And it also publicly pressured managers of an Ottawa convention center for renting space to Catholic organizations attending a pro-life march. The president of the Aristotle Foundation for Public Policy, Mark Milkey, said the public square needs robust debate, but, quote, what it doesn't need is the 800-pound gorilla of government funding advocacy groups that plant fake news. So the network was also co-founded by Amira El-Gwabi, who now serves in Prime Minister Mark Carney's cabinet as the special representative on combating Islamophobia, which of course is a role with a $191,000 salary. But according to its mission statements, the organization produces news articles, investigations, toolkits, and training materials designed to disrupt and compete with far-right movements. It also emphasizes collaboration with policymakers and legacy media outlets to amplify its work. So in short, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network isn't just an advocacy group, it's one that has positioned itself as both activist and media producer, while of course being heavily subsidized by Ottawa. BC Conservative leader John Rustad has won a leadership review with nearly 71% of party members backing him. Of 1,268 eligible members, 70.66% voted yes for Rustad to continue as leader, while 29.34% voted against him. Rustad won in 78 of 93 ridings where votes were held. He lost in 10 ridings, tied in 3, and 2 ridings recorded no votes. Rustad said in a statement, quote, "I would like to thank our members for coming out to use their democratic right and voicing their opinion on the direction of our party and movement. This process has localized democracy and allowed all members to not only vote in this crucial review but share their concerns with me directly." He added, quote, "I believe the members have given me a mandate to lead, and I believe British Columbians are hungry for an unapologetic, common-sense conservative government. We will make it happen. It's time we get back to the basics and be conservative." Mark Robertson, the party's returning officer, administered the leadership review process, and an impartial third party conducted the vote count. According to the party, Robertson traveled across the province during the summer, overseeing voting logistics. So Alex, obviously we've written a lot about Rustad at True North, and he's controversial even within the conservative movement in BC. But what is Rustad taking out of this leadership review? What does he view as his mandate from supporters of his party in BC?
So, Isaac, as we had written about previously at True North, he introduced something called the 11-point pledge. And amongst that 11-point pledge were some promises to not only his constituents, but obviously potential voters in a future election. Those included law and order, cracking down on violent crime, fast-tracking prosecutions, and specifically targeting random stranger attacks. Also, he wanted to ban age-inappropriate content in schools, somewhat similar to the policies being supported in Alberta by Premier Daniel Smith, something that you are familiar with yourself. Also pushing for stronger election voter ID rules. There were a lot of concerns about the fairness of the last provincial election. And so I imagine that appealed to a lot of conservatives specifically. He also promised to offer an end to mass immigration policies. That one I think would be a bit more challenging given that the provincial government has limited carriage over immigration, but still something that I think would largely appeal to his base. In terms of what this win means, I think that it's premature to say that it's either overwhelmingly positive or overwhelmingly negative. However, on the positive side, what we can say is that he is still the leader of the Conservative Party. On the negative side, he nearly lost a third of the votes. On the whole, I would say this is clearly a win for Rustad, as he received nearly 2/3 of the party membership in the latest Conservative leadership race. It will be interesting to see how he balances this mandate with the realities of governing and appealing to a BC broader electorate. As people are well aware, BC, for better or worse, I would say probably worse, is incredibly left coast. And so Rustad has a considerable challenge on his hands. He has to appeal to the more conservative voices within his own party, but he also has to appeal to the broader population of BC, many of which do not identify as corely conservative. From the party's perspective, however, this vote is being framed as grassroots exercise in democracy, and Rustad is using it to position himself as the leading voice for the conservatives in the province, heading into the next election, whatever that happens to be.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.